I don't know. I forgot it. Forgot my jacket. I forgot my mask. I'm just all over the place.
Are you in the pavilions?
Yeah. Ironically, I'm seeking refuge from construction happening at my house. So
Yeah, I hear you.
it's nice and quiet over here.
Mm.
Right, Carrie is the host again, and as you will see in the upper left-hand corner, there's an icon showing us that we are live on YouTube. Again, I will put a reminder in the chat that we are taking screenshots. If you don't want your work or your photo posted on social media, do let us know. And good luck to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. We'll make sure we have the majority of our critics before we get going. So I am checking that.
I see Sergio.
Great.
Hey, Andrew. Hey, everyone.
What's up?
We have Seth Rodewald Bates in the house.
How's everyone doing?
Seth Bates, as I live and breathe.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute.
Yup.
Andrew, I can hear you through someone's microphone from way across the pavilion.
I'm in stereo.
I think we're still waiting on a couple. Is Robert Mosby here? Not yet.
Just shot out a text from Mr. Mosby.
Perfect. And I think Troy, we're still waiting on Troy to.
Just forward him the email again.
There's Troy.
Hey,
Excellent.
let's switch slides.
So I think it's just Robert then.
He's coming. I think yeah, he's I may have messed up.
Hi, Mehmet.
Hello, how are
Carrie.
you?
Hey, Troy, welcome. Okay. Any word on Robert?
Mr. Robert Mosby is with us.
I'm here.
There he is.
Oh, great. Okay. Hi, Robert. Welcome.
Thanks.
So I think we're all here and we'll get started. So welcome everyone. This is day 2 of our final reviews for the second year and first year graduate studio. I'm Carrie Norman, coordinator of this studio, and thank you again for everybody joining. I do have a brief presentation on the studio and importantly, the site of the studio. But before moving into that, I'd like to quickly introduce our impressive lineup of jurors. Between our 2 days of reviews for the studio, we've had and have jurors joining us all the way from Germany and Canada, as well as New York, Texas, North Carolina, and of course, Louisiana. Today, we are joined by Troy Sham, Associate Professor at Rice School of Architecture and co-founder of Sham Shea Architects. We are also joined by Sergio Padilla on the faculty at LSU, in addition to Robert Mosby, project architect at ZGF Architects in New York City, and Seth Rodwald Bates, associate at James Corner Field Operations. And from Tulane, we will be joined by Professor Wendy Redfield, Andrew Lyles, Benjamin Smith, Tony DiMaggio, and myself. So I'm going to go ahead now, share my screen. Give me just one moment. You guys see that?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so the students, everybody's sick of me saying this, but I really am amazed that we've made it to final review for this studio. Just for some context for the jurors, this has been an extra challenge-filled semester for us. Of course, on top of the ongoing pandemic, we have endured a major hurricane requiring us to temporarily evacuate the city. We have been through a remote, hybrid, and in-person teaching environment. We have experienced power outages, Wi-Fi and HVAC failures, and even an electrical fire. Some of the students were displaced from their places of residence and relocated to nearby hotels, while others suffered computer and other equipment damage, but we made it. And so before we begin, I want to thank all of the students and the teaching team for their commitment and resolve through all of these challenges. First off, I'd also like to introduce our teaching team. We have an exceptional teaching team this semester. The teaching team represents an extraordinary array of experience and accomplishment, perhaps more than I have ever taught with. The team includes veterans of this studio, faculty new to Tulane, faculty from the thesis program, former coordinators of second year, a former associate dean of the school, and multiple faculty who teach core courses of the architecture degree. So here is the team. Nimet Anwar, Nick Jenish, Charles Jones, Andrew Lyles, myself, Wendy Redfield, and Cordula Roser Gray. And now the studio. This is the third installation of this particular studio curriculum. It's a fantastic curriculum developed by Professor Judith Kennard. Professor Kennard is on sabbatical this year, and so I've stepped in as sort of the caretaker. The curriculum of this studio places emphasis on architecture arising through section and site. But another way, the focus of the semester is really on the relationship between landscape and building. So guiding our inquiry into this relationship, we've begun considering this lens through 4 propositions. And if you consider them relative to the ground, they offer up kind of basic sectional strategies. And when we think of in, we could think of carving into the solidity of the ground versus the figure of architecture, or inhabiting the in-between, and reclaiming architecture as program in a space of passing through. Something like on might imply architecture as a new ecological ground, or the calibrated intersection between land and water, or architecture as a thickened edge. Above might imply architecture as an urban vertical condition, intersecting the site as a translated field condition, and so on. In this studio, ground is no longer accepted as this kind of default abstract horizontal plane, but as a conditional, relational, aesthetic, and contextual site. So the studio is formatted around 2 projects. The first, A Room with a View, tasks students with designing a small structure cited in an artist's representation of a landscape. Students are offered a selection of landscape views, either painted or photographed, to choose among. The view is first analyzed and then reconstructed. Reconstructions involve the making of 2.5-dimensional relief models, or peep shows, that recast the view as a stage set. Here, and through the introduction of scale figures, students work through questions of how the site might be occupied and by whom. Reconstructing the site also involves drawing it according to architecture's primary projections. These are plan, section, and axonometric. The studio focuses not only on the role of the landscape in architectural design, but also prioritizes the development of basic skills in site analysis, site design, and representation of site. At Tulane, the second-year students and first-year graduate students have co-requisite courses in site strategies taught by Professor Margarita Joubert, and a course called Digital Media, a representation course that prepares students with foundational skills in digital architectural production. And that's co-taught this year by myself and this year's Architecture and Urbanism Fellow, Omar Ali. Project 1 concludes with the design of a small building with a room from which the landscape can be viewed. The program is simple. It's a studio/gallery for the artist. The remainder of the semester is devoted to Project 2. Like Project 1, students are tasked with defining site beyond an abstract set of property lines, and additionally engage the material and immaterial properties that form it. These include, but are not limited to, changing physical, social, political, economic, and material histories of a place. Ultimately, the studio considers the effects that these properties have on the social, formal, and programmatic identity of a civic institutional typology. In this case, an environmental education center situated on Jefferson Island, Louisiana. For those unfamiliar, Jefferson Island is one of 5 salt dome, quote unquote, islands that form prominent topographic landmarks amidst the cane fields and tidal marshes along the central coast of Louisiana. These islands have unique ecosystems and a rich geological, economic, and cultural history. 2 of these islands are represented on this map: Avery Island in the lower right corner and Jefferson Island in the upper left corner. Avery Island is perhaps most famous because that's where Tabasco is produced. And Jefferson Island was once the center of a bustling salt and oil mining industry. The term island here is used pretty loosely, and it refers to these sites' unique topography, separating them from the rest of Louisiana's otherwise very flat landscape. What we see above ground as hills on these islands is the product of a salt dome structure beneath the surface. So forgive me, bear with me. I do have just a brief history lesson that is sort of useful for this studio. The story of salt domes actually begins millions of years ago when the earth was covered by salty oceans and inland seas. Over time, when the water evaporated, fields of salt were left behind. The concentration of salt domes in the South, and indeed Louisiana, are then a product of the fluctuations of the Gulf of Mexico. So over the course of thousands of years, the salt fields were covered eventually by rocks and other sediment, but with salt being more buoyant, it would move upwards through these layers. And it's this upward movement that forms the domes and pushes the terrain vertically around them. So here is a sort of illustrative cutaway of a typical salt dome. Domes can be 1 to 5 miles across and reach as deep as 10,000 feet. Important to note here, it is not just salt present in these domes. If you look closely, you'll find oil, gas, sulfur, and other resources along the salt dome's edges. And all 3 of these resources were mined at times concurrently at Jefferson Island. The salt mining operations at Jefferson Island were quite extensive. Here you're seeing what's called the room and pillar method of mining. Room and pillar mining is a method of extracting a series of rooms, i.e. long horizontal openings, while leaving behind pillars of salt. So just note the person in the image for scale. And above ground, extensive networks of transportation infrastructure were constructed over water and over land to move the mined materials off the site. As mentioned, salt domes are prime places to drill for oil and natural gas. And in 1980, an oil rig contracted by Texaco was doing some exploratory drilling above the salt mine. A critical error in calculations resulted in the oil rig's 14-inch drill bit becoming stuck and piercing a cavity of the salt mine. So in a matter of hours, a major sinkhole would develop, swallowing the drilling platform, 11 barges, a tugboat, several trees, and 65 acres of the surrounding terrain. So much water drained into the mining cavities that the flow of an adjoining canal reversed, causing salt water from the Gulf of Mexico to flow into the drained lake bed. The backflow created the tallest waterfall in the state of Louisiana at 164 feet, accompanied by 400-foot geysers springing from the mine shafts. Today, little evidence remains from the site's mining history. So much is hidden below ground or built over. Aside from a few relics from its past, the site today is mostly visited for its lush landscape and its botanical gardens. One of the surviving structures includes this house, the Joseph Jefferson Mansion, built in 1870. It's now a structure listed on the National Register of Historic Places. We can kind of look to it as a standing example of Victorian era Southern plantation style homes. And near the water's edge, this is the former site of the salt mining operation. And here you see a portion of one of those buildings that remains. And we also can kind of see the concrete foundation where that large structure once stood, and also around the site, around this location is one of the original air shafts from the salt mine. And here, some remaining piles of the former loading pier. And this is my favorite. Perhaps serving most kind of visibly as a reminder of the drilling disaster is the presence of this chimney poking out of Lake Peigneur. So when the sinkhole swallowed the 65 acres, as mentioned, of the surrounding land, a smaller guest house was swallowed along with it. And it's now below the lake surface with this chimney that reminds us that it's there. So next, well, I guess just to summarize, it's quite a complex site. So the students begin project 2 with research presentations. A couple of the topics are noted. So these presentations cover a wide but focused set of subjects. Next, they take on an analytical set of drawings focused on revealing the more hidden features from the site and its history. And then following the research phase, the analysis, and a site visit, students select one of 4 sites within the island. The 4 sites represent distinct sectional conditions and may be described as 1, perched on the hilltop, 2, inserted into the hillside, 3, occupying the mine site at the water's edge, and 4, occupying the space of the former loading pier. Like project 1, the site is drawn in plan, section, and axonometric prior to beginning any design work. And then for the last 5.5 weeks or so, students have been working on design proposals for an environmental education center. Here you can see the program breakdown. Any questions from our jurors?
Fascinating story. I actually did a project on a salt dome in Texas as well that has an equally weird history. So there needs to be a book of histories of salt domes, I think, written. It's an amazing kind of urban geological and geographical phenomenon. Yeah.
That's great, Troy. Is that a studio or was that a personal, was that just a?
No, that was
personal
there's near Houston, a salt dome has become a wildlife refuge of some note that the Audubon takes care of. And the reason it's a wildlife refuge of some note is because the oil and gas extraction that was happening around this salt dome produced freshwater lakes. Reservoirs were built on top to support that. And those reservoirs, now that the oil and gas has been abandoned, has become a really important stopover for bird migration. And so the Audubon Society supports it. And anyway, we did a boardwalk and a visitor center bathroom for it. But yeah, I imagine there were, but it has equally kind of strange history of extraction and the way in which that extraction is like transforming into other kinds of habitat formation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange confluence of ecologies there that we're that you're mentioning. So it's a strange contradiction of types. So we've kind of wrapped up the intro with about 9 or 10 minutes ahead of schedule. So I propose we take a stretch, a little break, and then return into the individual section Zoom links at 1:30. So get a refill on your coffee, take a bathroom break, stretch before we begin.
Sounds
All right,
good.
thank you.
Thanks.
See you all soon.
Yeah,
Ready.
thanks, Carrie.